March 16, 1944. The North Atlantic, approximately 300 miles west of Cape Verde Islands. Kapitänleutnant Günther Müller-Stöckheim commanded U-616, a type Civil U-boat conducting its 7th war patrol. At 14:30 hours, his hydrophone operator reported propeller sounds indicating a convoy approximately 12 miles distant. Müller-Stöckheim brought his boat to periscope depth, expecting to find the usual configuration. Slow merchant ships protected by perhaps 2 or 3 destroyers or corvettes that could be evaded through standard wolfpack tactics. What he observed through his periscope fundamentally challenged his understanding of Atlantic convoy warfare. The merchant ships proceeded in standard formation, but the escort included not just destroyers but a small aircraft carrier, one of the American vessel's German submariners, derisively called jeep carriers or Kaiser Coffins. These were the CVE-class escort carriers, small flat tops built in American shipyards at rates the Kriegsmarine had dismissed as obvious propaganda. Müller-Stöckheim, trained in the classical U-boat tactics that had devastated Allied shipping from 1940 through 1942, made the tactical decision that would cost him his boat and his life. He assumed the small carrier, clearly an inferior vessel compared to fleet carriers, posed minimal threat to a properly handled U-boat. He maneuvered for attack position. At 14:47 hours, aircraft from USS Bogue, the escort carrier Müller-Stöckheim had dismissed as negligible, detected U-616 on surface radar at a range of 22 miles. TBM Avenger aircraft launched immediately, arriving over the U-boat's position while it remained at periscope depth, unaware of detection. At 15:02 hours, depth charges from the Avengers forced U-616 to the surface. Destroyer escorts from Bogue's hunter-killer group converged at 32 knots. By 15:37 hours, U-616 was a spreading oil slick with no survivors. Müller-Stöckheim died never understanding that the vessel he had mocked represented a revolution in anti-submarine warfare that would destroy the U-boat arm's operational effectiveness within 18 months. The sinking of U-616 represented one engagement in a systematic campaign that transformed the Battle of the Atlantic from a desperate Allied defensive struggle into a methodical extermination of German submarine forces. The jeep carriers, mocked by German naval commanders as improvised stopgaps built by a nation lacking proper naval tradition, would sink or assist in the destruction of 53 U-boats directly and contribute to the demise of hundreds more through systematic denial of operational freedom. The same industrial philosophy that shocked Japanese officers when they discovered American submarines had air conditioning shocked German submariners when they discovered that American industry could build aircraft carriers faster than Germany could build submarines, and that these supposedly inferior carriers were devastatingly effective submarine hunters. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the U-boat arm and later supreme commander of the Kriegsmarine, had built German submarine strategy around a mathematical calculation. If U-boats could sink merchant shipping faster than the Allies could build replacements, Britain would be starved into submission and the United States isolated from European operations. The appearance of escort carriers in substantial numbers beginning in 1943 destroyed this calculation completely. The jeep carriers did not just protect convoys, they actively hunted U-boats, turning the hunters into the hunted and demonstrating that American industrial capacity could mass-produce not just merchant ships and submarines, but aircraft carriers optimized specifically for anti-submarine warfare. The divergent evolution of American escort carrier development and German U-boat doctrine began with fundamentally opposed assumptions about industrial warfare and naval strategy. These assumptions would determine the outcome of the Battle of the Atlantic as decisively as any tactical engagement. German U-boat doctrine, refined through the successes of 1940 through 1942, emphasized the submarine as a commerce raider operating in coordinated wolf packs. Admiral Karl Dönitz, promoted to commander of the U-boat arm in 1936, developed tactical systems based on group attacks against convoys. His doctrine, codified in the Kriegsmarine's tactical handbooks preserved in German naval archives, assumed that submarine attacks would overwhelm convoy escorts through coordinated assault. A typical wolf pack consisted of 8 to 20 U-boats concentrating against a single convoy, attacking at night on the surface, where U-boats possessed speed advantages over submerged operations, and where Allied sonar was ineffective. The doctrine worked devastatingly well in the early war years. From June 1940 through December 1941, U-boats operating in wolf packs sank approximately 2,300 Allied merchant ships, totaling over 11 million tons. This represented shipping losses far exceeding Allied construction capacity. Dönitz calculated that sinking 700,000 tons monthly would strangle Britain's economy and war-making capacity. In November 1942, U-boats achieved their peak success, sinking 729,000 tons, exceeding the threshold Dönitz considered decisive. The German Navy's assessment of Allied countermeasures, documented in Kriegsmarine intelligence reports from 1942, acknowledged that aircraft posed the primary threat to surfaced U-boats, but concluded that Allied air coverage remained inadequate. The black gap in the mid-Atlantic, beyond the range of land-based aircraft, provided operational space where U-boats could surface, maneuver at high speed, and attack with minimal air threat. German planners recognized that aircraft carriers could close this gap, but assumed the Royal Navy and United States Navy would never allocate fleet carriers, valuable capital ships, to convoy escort duty. The few escort carriers the British had improvised from merchant hulls were dismissed as inadequate compromises, too slow, too poorly equipped, and too few to materially impact U-boat operations. Then American industrial capacity entered the equation. In 1941, Henry Kaiser, a shipbuilder who had revolutionized merchant ship construction through assembly line techniques, proposed a radically simplified aircraft carrier design optimized for mass production. Kaiser's concept, developed in collaboration with the US Navy's Bureau of Ships, created the Casablanca-class escort carrier, designated CVE. The design sacrificed speed, armor, and aircraft capacity compared to fleet carriers, but gained critical advantages. Simplicity enabling rapid construction, adequate capability for anti-submarine operations, and production techniques allowing unprecedented build rates. The CVE design specifications, preserved in Bureau of Ships technical documents declassified in 1972, reveal the engineering philosophy underlying American escort carrier development. Displacement was limited to 7,800 tons, substantially smaller than the 27,000-ton Essex-class fleet carriers then entering production. Maximum speed reached only 19 knots compared to 33 knots for fleet carriers. Aircraft capacity totaled 27 planes versus 90 to 100 for fleet carriers. Armor protection was minimal. The flight deck measured 512 feet, barely adequate for contemporary carrier aircraft operations. German naval analysts reviewing intelligence on CVE specifications, documented in Kriegsmarine assessment reports from early 1943, dismissed the design as further evidence of American naval incompetence. Korvettenkapitän Günther Hessler, Dönitz's son-in-law and tactical analyst, wrote in a February 1943 assessment that American escort carriers represented makeshift vessels, too small for effective carrier operations, too slow to operate with the fleet, clearly built by a nation lacking understanding of proper naval architecture. These vessels will prove operationally insignificant, suitable perhaps for aircraft transport, but incapable of meaningful combat contribution. The U-boat arm faces no serious threat from such improvised compromises. What German analysts failed to comprehend was that American escort carriers were not designed to fight other warships or support amphibious assaults like fleet carriers. They were designed for one specific mission: finding and killing submarines. For this mission, the CVE possessed exactly adequate capability while offering one overwhelming advantage. They could be built in quantities that made numerical superiority inevitable. Kaiser's shipyards, applying automobile industry mass production techniques to warship construction, achieved build rates that German planners considered impossible propaganda. The first Casablanca-class CVE, USS Casablanca designated CVE 55, was laid down on November 3, 1942, at Kaiser's Vancouver, Washington facility. The ship was launched on April 5, 1943, and commissioned on July 8, 1943, representing a construction time of just 247 days from keel laying to commissioning. By comparison, German Type 7C U-boats, the backbone of the U-boat arm, required approximately 280 to 330 days from keel laying to commissioning. American industry was building aircraft carriers faster than Germany was building submarines, and the carriers were purpose-built submarine hunters. Kaiser's Vancouver yard eventually produced one complete CVE every 6.7 days on average, during peak production in 1943 and 1944. The shipyard employed assembly line techniques unprecedented in warship construction, with hull sections prefabricated in workshops, then moved to slipways for final assembly. Electrical systems, plumbing, ventilation, and internal structures were installed as modular units. The flight deck, constructed as separate sections, was lowered onto the hull by massive cranes in a single operation. The production statistics validated Kaiser's methods. From 1943 through 1944, American shipyards produced 78 Casablanca-class CVEs, along with 44 additional escort carriers of other classes, for a total of 122 CVE-type vessels commissioned during the war. This production occurred simultaneously with construction of 24 Essex-class fleet carriers, 9 Independence-class light carriers, 175 Fletcher-class destroyers, 72 Gearing-class destroyers, 563 destroyer escorts, and 122 submarines, demonstrating industrial capacity Germany could not approach. The cost comparison revealed American industrial efficiency. Each Casablanca-class CVE cost approximately $6.2 million, equivalent to roughly $110 million in 2024 currency. For comparison, one Essex-class fleet carrier cost approximately $78 million in 1943, equivalent to $1.4 billion in 2024 dollars. The United States could build 12 escort carriers for the cost of one fleet carrier, and each escort carrier could prosecute anti-submarine operations as effectively as far more expensive. Fleet carriers while freeing. Fleet carriers for offensive operations. The aircraft aboard CVEs were optimized for submarine hunting. The primary aircraft was the Grumman TBM Avenger torpedo bomber, capable of carrying depth charges, acoustic homing torpedoes, or rockets. The Avenger could remain airborne for up to 5 hours, providing persistent surveillance over convoy routes. Equipped with radar capable of detecting surface submarines at ranges exceeding 20 miles, Avengers could locate U-boats that had surfaced to charge batteries or transit at high speed. Wildcat fighters provided combat air patrol against German long-range reconnaissance aircraft while also capable of attacking surface submarines with machine guns and bombs. The operational concept developed by the US Navy in late 1942 and refined through 1943 created hunter-killer groups centered on CVEs. Unlike convoy escort carriers that remained with merchant ships, hunter-killer groups actively sought U-boats reported by intelligence or detected by convoy escorts. A typical hunter-killer group consisted of 1 CVE and 4 to 6 destroyer escorts, forming a self-sufficient submarine hunting force. The CVE provided persistent air coverage, while destroyer escorts prosecuted sonar contacts and depth-charged submerged submarines. Captain Daniel Gallery, commanding officer of USS Guadalcanal, one of the most successful hunter-killer CVEs, described the operational philosophy in a 1944 report to Commander-in-Chief Atlantic Fleet, preserved in Naval Historical Center archives. Gallery wrote that the hunter-killer concept reversed traditional anti-submarine warfare doctrine, which emphasized protecting convoys through close escort. Instead of waiting for U-boats to attack convoys, hunter-killer groups took the offensive, searching suspected U-boat operating areas and attacking submarines before they could threaten shipping. The CVE's aircraft provided surveillance coverage impossible for surface ships alone, detecting submarines at ranges exceeding 50 miles and maintaining contact during prosecution by destroyer escorts. German U-boat commanders first encountered operational CVEs in early 1943 and initially dismissed them as marginal threats. Kapitänleutnant Herbert Werner, who survived multiple patrols and later published a memoir in 1969, described the German response to early CVE encounters. In March 1943, Werner's U-230 detected a convoy protected by what appeared to be a small carrier. The U-boat command's standing orders advised treating escort carriers as lower priority targets than merchant ships, assuming their anti-submarine capability was limited. Werner attempted a standard surface approach at night, but was forced to dive by aircraft equipped with searchlights and radar. After 3 hours submerged, U-230 surfaced to find the convoy had escaped. Werner filed a patrol report noting the inconvenience of carrier-based aircraft, but did not assess the encounter as representing fundamental change in anti-submarine warfare. The assessment would change drastically within months. The combination of increasing CVE numbers, improving tactics, and advancing technology would transform the Battle of the Atlantic from German offensive to German catastrophe. In less than a year, May 1943, the month German submariners would forever remember as Black May. The transformation of the Battle of the Atlantic from U-boat dominance to Allied ascendancy occurred with stunning speed as Escort, carriers and improved anti-submarine warfare tactics converged to devastating effect. May began with Dönitz commanding approximately 240 operational U-boats, the largest force assembled during the war. Intelligence indicated Allied convoy schedules and weather conditions favored submarine operations. German Naval Command anticipated another successful month, matching or exceeding the 729,000-ton sinking rate achieved in November 1942. Instead, May 1943 witnessed the destruction of the U-boat arm's offensive capability in 30 catastrophic days. The operational statistics from May 1943, compiled in Allied Naval Staff historical records and confirmed by post-war analysis of German records, documented systematic slaughter. Allied forces sank 41 U-boats during May, representing nearly 17% of operational boats destroyed in a single month. For comparison, average monthly U-boat losses from 1940 through 1942 totaled approximately 5 boats. The loss rate had increased eightfold while U-boat successes simultaneously collapsed. German submarines sank only 264,000 tons of Allied shipping in May 1943, barely one-third the tonnage Dönitz calculated as necessary for strategic success. Escort carriers participated directly in multiple May sinkings and fundamentally altered tactical conditions, even when not directly involved in kills. USS Bogue, operating with hunter-killer group composed of destroyer escorts Osmond Ingram, George E. Badger, Clemson, and DuPont, demonstrated the CVE's devastating effectiveness. On May 22, 1943, Bogue aircraft detected U-569 surfaced 80 miles from the carrier. TBM Avengers, armed with depth charges, attacked immediately, forcing the U-boat to dive with severe damage. Destroyer escort Osmond Ingram prosecuted sonar contact, delivering depth charge patterns that brought U-569 to the surface. The submarine scuttled with 47 survivors rescued, including the commanding officer who provided interrogators with detailed accounts of how aircraft detection had made surface operations impossible. The captured U-569 crew interrogation transcripts, declassified in 1984 from naval intelligence files, revealed German submariners' growing recognition that fundamental conditions had changed. Oberleutnant zur See Hans-Peter Hinsch, U-569's executive officer, stated during interrogation that U-boat commanders had received warnings about increased Allied air coverage, but assumed this meant more long-range patrol aircraft operating from land bases. The appearance of carriers with convoys, and worse, carriers actively hunting U-boats away from convoy routes, created operational conditions where surface operations became suicidal. Hinch stated that in previous patrols, U-boats could surface at night with reasonable security, charging batteries and transiting at 17 knots surface speed versus 7 knots submerged. Now, aircraft equipped with radar could detect surface submarines at night, eliminating the cover of darkness that had made Wolfpack tactics viable. USS Bogue's success continued through May and June 1943. On June 5th, Bogue aircraft detected and attacked U-217, achieving a kill that demonstrated the hunter-killer concept's efficiency. The attack occurred 720 miles from the nearest land, in the mid-Atlantic gap where U-boats had previously operated with near impunity. U-217 had surfaced to charge batteries when detected by radar-equipped Avenger at 2340 hours. Depth charges straddled the submarine, causing catastrophic damage. The boat sank within minutes, with only 3 survivors from a crew of 49. One survivor, Matrosengerfreiter Wilhelm Braun, told interrogators that U-217's commanding officer had expressed confidence that mid-ocean operations remained relatively safe from air attack. The appearance of carrier aircraft hundreds of miles from land fundamentally violated German assumptions about Allied capability. The cumulative psychological impact on U-boat crews became evident in patrol, reports and prisoner interrogations from mid-1943 onward. Kapitänleutnant Peter Kramer, commanding U-333, filed a patrol report in June 1943, preserved in German naval archives documenting the transformation. Kramer wrote that standing orders still directed Wolfpack assembly and surface approaches to convoys, but aircraft made such tactics impossible. U-333 attempted to close a convoy, but was forced to dive 5 times in 6 hours by aircraft detection. Each dive required at minimum 30 minutes submerged to evade, during which the convoy escaped. Kramer stated that without ability to surface for high-speed pursuit, U-boats could not intercept convoys with any reliability. He concluded that either tactics must change to account for continuous air threat or U-boat operations would become unsustainable. Dönitz received increasingly desperate patrol reports through summer 1943, describing operational conditions incompatible with successful submarine warfare. His response, documented in Kriegsmarine command directives from July and August 1943, revealed a commander confronting strategic failure but unable to accept the implications. Dönitz ordered U-boats to fight aircraft when surprised on surface rather than diving, assuming concentrated anti-aircraft fire could drive off attackers. This directive resulted in catastrophic losses as individual U-boats attempted to fight aircraft in surface combat. U-boats mounting typically 4 20mm anti-aircraft guns faced aircraft equipped with 50 caliber machine guns, 20mm cannons, depth charges, rockets, and acoustic homing torpedoes. The engagement was fundamentally asymmetric. Aircraft could attack from advantageous positions, absorb some damage and return to carrier for repair, while U-boats were destroyed by single successful attacks. The results of Dönitz's fight-back directive appear in loss statistics from August and September 1943. Aircraft, primarily carrier-based, sank or assisted in sinking 25 U-boats in August and 22 in September. Several boats were destroyed in surface combat with aircraft, validating Allied tactical superiority in such engagements. U-847, attacked by Avengers from USS Bogue on August 27, 1943, attempted surface combat. The aircraft's 50 caliber guns killed the U-boat's bridge crew, silenced anti-aircraft guns, and delivered depth charges that forced diving with critical damage. The submarine resurfaced, out of control, and sank with all hands. USS Bogue, under command of Captain Arnold Buster Isbell, established itself as one of the most effective hunter-killer CVEs during 1943 patrols. Bogue's aircraft and escort vessels sank U-117, U-664, and U-847 between July and August 1943, demonstrating systematic prosecution capability. Isbell developed tactics for night attacks using aircraft equipped with powerful searchlights called Lee lights that illuminated surface submarines during final attack runs. German commanders advised of night surface detections assumed darkness still provided some security. The appearance of illuminated aircraft delivering depth charges at night eliminated even this minimal protection. The interrogation of survivors from U-172, sunk by aircraft from USS Bogue in December 1943, provided detailed insight into German crew morale deterioration. Kapitänleutnant Karl U-170's commander, survived the sinking and during interrogation described conditions aboard U-boats by late 1943. Emmermann stated that crew confidence in mission success had collapsed. Previous generations of submariners believed skillful commanders could evade escorts and successfully attack convoys. By late 1943, submariners understood that escort carriers made convoy approach nearly impossible and that hunter-killer groups actively sought U-boats throughout the Atlantic. Emmermann stated that departing for patrol felt like a death sentence. Statistically, he noted, boats had perhaps 30% chance of surviving patrol. Crews joked grimly that the question was not whether the boat would be sunk, but only when and by what method. German Naval Command faced strategic crisis by late 1943. Dönitz, promoted to Commander-in-Chief of the Kriegsmarine in January 1943 following Admiral Raeder's resignation, retained direct control of U-boat operations. His assessment of the situation, documented in conferences with Hitler preserved in German military archives, revealed recognition that escort carriers had fundamentally altered the tactical environment. In a conference dated November 19, 1943, Dönitz stated to Hitler that Allied aircraft from land bases and carriers now provided coverage across virtually all Atlantic convoy routes. U-boats could no longer surface with acceptable security. Submerged operations reduced speed, range, and attack effectiveness to levels incompatible with successful commerce warfare. Losses exceeded replacement capacity despite accelerated U-boat construction. Hitler demanded continued operations regardless of losses, believing U-boat presence alone forced Allies to divert resources to anti-submarine warfare. Dönitz complied but privately acknowledged to staff that U-boat arm was being sacrificed without reasonable prospect of strategic success. His diary entries from late 1943, captured after the war and translated by Allied intelligence, expressed frustration that American industrial capacity had produced not just merchant ships in Overwhelming numbers but purpose-built. Submarine hunters faster than Germany could produce. Submarines. The statistical reality confirmed Dönitz's assessment. From January through December 1943, Allied anti-submarine forces sank 237 U-boats. Escort carriers participated directly in sinking 26 boats and assisted in destroying dozens more by providing air coverage that forced submarines to remain submerged, preventing attacks and facilitating surface ship prosecution. German industry produced approximately 270 new U-boats during 1943, barely exceeding losses. However, crew training capacity could not match production rates. Experienced crews were being killed faster than replacements could be adequately trained. By late 1943, U-boats departed on patrol with commanders who had never made successful attacks and crews who had minimal operational experience. The escort carriers had not merely protected convoys, they had systematically destroyed the U-boat arm's ability to conduct offensive operations, transforming the Battle of the Atlantic from desperate Allied defense to methodical German annihilation. The jeep carriers that German commanders mocked in 1942 had proven devastatingly effective by late 1943, validating American industrial philosophy that adequate weapons produced in overwhelming numbers defeat superior weapons produced in limited quantities. The systematic destruction of U-boat operational capability through 1944 revealed how American escort carriers transformed anti-submarine warfare from reactive convoy defense to proactive submarine elimination. The statistics demonstrated mathematical certainty. U-boats could not survive against persistent air coverage combined with coordinated surface attack. The hunter-killer group tactical system matured through 1943 and reached peak effectiveness in 1944. The operational pattern established by successful CVE groups became standardized across the Atlantic fleet's 10 escort carrier hunter-killer groups active by January 1944. Each group operated independently, assigned to patrol zones based on U-boat intelligence developed through signals intercepts, direction finding, and patrol reports. The CVE maintained continuous air patrols during daylight hours, with aircraft aloft from dawn to dusk, each aircraft covering approximately 12,000 square miles during a 4-hour patrol. Radar-equipped aircraft operated at night when U-boats traditionally surfaced to charge batteries and transit at high speed. USS Guadalcanal's hunter-killer group, commanded by Captain Daniel Gallery, demonstrated the system's effectiveness through an unprecedented achievement, the capture of an intact U-boat complete with Enigma cipher materials. On June 4, 1944, Guadalcanal aircraft detected U-505 southwest of Cape Verde Islands. The U-boat had surfaced to charge batteries when radar contact occurred at 14:10 hours. TBM Avenger, piloted by Lieutenant Junior Grade, Albert David attacked immediately, delivering depth charges that caused severe damage and forced U-505 to surface. Destroyer escort Pillsbury closed rapidly, while additional Avengers strafed the submarine, suppressing defensive fire. U-505's crew abandoned ship, believing the submarine was sinking. Gallery, recognizing an opportunity to capture valuable intelligence materials, ordered a boarding party from Pillsbury to take control of the submarine. Lieutenant Albert David led the boarding party, entering the U-boat while it wallowed at surface with engines stopped. The boarding party discovered Enigma cipher machines, codebooks, and technical documents before securing hatches and preventing the submarine from sinking. USS Guadalcanal took U-505 under tow, eventually bringing the submarine to Bermuda, where naval intelligence exploited captured materials. The captured U-505 crew interrogation, conducted at Fort Hunt, Virginia, and declassified in 1995, provided comprehensive insight into U-boat operations under escort carrier pressure by 1944. Oberleutnant zur See Harald Lange, U-505's executive officer, described patrol conditions that made successful attacks virtually impossible. U-boats received intelligence on convoy routes but could not close convoys for attack because escort carriers forced submarines to remain submerged through continuous air patrols. Lange stated that U-505's patrol, its 12th, had achieved no successes during 58 days at sea. The boat had sighted 3 convoys, but could not approach any due to aircraft forcing dives whenever the submarine attempted surface transit. Submerged approach speed of 7 knots could not close convoys proceeding at 10 to 12 knots. The mathematical impossibility was obvious. Submarines slower than convoys cannot intercept convoys. The patrol endurance statistics revealed the cumulative impact of escort carrier operations on U-boat effectiveness. German Type 70C U-boats, the most common class with 703 boats built, carried fuel for approximately 8,500 nautical miles at economical speed or 6,500 miles including operational requirements. At surface speed of 17 knots, a U-boat could cover large ocean areas searching for convoys and maintain position for wolfpack attacks. Forced to operate submerged at 7 knots or less, patrol range decreased to perhaps 3,500 miles, while time to reach operational areas doubled. U-boats spent increasing time simply reaching patrol zones, reducing time available for actual operations. The success statistics documented the transformation. In 1942, before escort carriers became operational in numbers, each U-boat at sea averaged 0.47 ships sunk per patrol, with average patrol duration of 41 days. By 1944, with escort carriers and hunter-killer groups operational throughout the Atlantic, each U-boat averaged 0.08 ships sunk per patrol, with average patrol duration decreased to 28 days due to earlier losses. U-boats achieved 1/6 the sinking rate while facing vastly higher loss probability. The loss probability calculation demonstrated the deadly effectiveness of hunter-killer operations. From January through June 1944, Allied forces sank 119 U-boats. Escort carrier groups participated in sinking 31 boats directly through aircraft attacks or coordinated aircraft-destroyer escort prosecutions. Additionally, CVE groups drove submarines submerged in areas where other anti-submarine forces then prosecuted contacts. The U-boat force operational strength on January 1, 1944, totaled approximately 168 boats at sea, with another 220 in various stages of training or workup. By June 30, 1944, operational strength had declined to 104 boats at sea, with 187 in training. Despite continued new construction, losses exceeded replacements, while training bottlenecks prevented rapid crew development. USS Bogue continued demonstrating hunter-killer effectiveness through 1944. Captain Aurelius Short, commanding Bogue from January through May 1944, refined night attack techniques that eliminated the final operational window for U-boat surface operations. Short equipped Avengers with improved radar capable of detecting surface submarines at 28 miles and trained pilots in coordinated night attacks using illumination, followed by depth charge delivery. On May 31, 1944, Bogue aircraft detected U-549 surfaced at night, 260 miles from the carrier. The Avenger illuminated the submarine with Lee light and delivered depth charges that caused fatal damage. U-549 sank with all hands, demonstrating that even night surface operations had become impossible. The technological advantages available to escort carrier aircraft multiplied through 1944. Acoustic homing torpedoes, designated Mark 24 FIDO, became operational on CVE aircraft in May 1943. The FIDO homed on submarine propeller noise, eliminating the need for precise attack positioning. Aircraft could drop FIDO torpedoes anywhere near a submerged submarine, and the weapon would autonomously search and attack. From May 1943 through May 1945, FIDO torpedoes sank 37 U-boats and damaged dozens more. The psychological impact exceeded even the kill statistics. U-boat crews understood that submerging no longer guaranteed survival. Aircraft could attack submerged submarines with weapons that pursued the boat regardless of evasive maneuvers. USS Kroaten, operating under command of Captain John Hefner, sank U-490 on June 12, 1944, using coordinated aircraft and destroyer escort attacks that exemplified mature hunter-killer tactics. Croatan aircraft detected U-490 through radar contact at row 3.8 hours at range of 22 miles. The submarine was surfaced, charging batteries while transiting toward patrol zone. Aircraft attacked immediately with depth charges, causing damage that prevented diving. Destroyer escorts closed at maximum speed, while additional aircraft suppressed U-boat anti-aircraft fire with strafing runs. By 0425 hours, U-490 was sinking. Only 11 crew members survived from complement of 60. The survivor interrogation from U-490, conducted aboard USS Kroaten immediately after rescue, documented crew awareness that U-boat operations had become suicide missions by mid-1944. Matrosengefreiter Franz Decker stated that U-490's crew departed on patrol. Understanding they would likely not return, previous patrols had been dangerous. By 1944, they were simply fatal. Decker stated that submarine bases resembled funeral homes more than military installations. Crews departing on patrol understood the mathematics, approximately 75% probability of being sunk during the patrol. Those who returned described conditions where aircraft coverage made operations impossible, and where mere survival consumed all tactical attention, precluding actual attacks on shipping. The industrial mathematics reinforced tactical advantages. From January 1943 through May 1945, American shipyards delivered 78 Casablanca-class escort carriers, each optimized for anti-submarine warfare. Additional Bogue-class and Sangamon-class CVEs brought total escort carrier numbers to 122 vessels commissioned during the war. Peak operational strength reached 32 CVEs assigned to Atlantic anti-submarine duties in June 1944. For comparison, German U-boat operational strength in the Atlantic averaged 65 boats in June 1944. The Allies deployed 1 CVE for every 2 U-boats at sea, ensuring that virtually all submarine operating areas received air coverage. The cost comparison validated American industrial efficiency. Total program cost for 78 Casablanca-class CVEs reached approximately $480 million, equivalent to roughly $8.6 billion in 2024 currency. Germany's total expenditure on U-boat construction from 1942 through 1944 approximated 2.8 billion Reichsmarks, equivalent to roughly $15 billion in 2024 dollars. Germany spent nearly twice as much producing submarines that escort carriers systematically destroyed at rates exceeding German replacement capacity. The sinking statistics through 1944 demonstrated mathematical inevitability. Allied anti-submarine forces sank 241 U-boats during 1944, representing approximately 60% of average operational strength. Escort carriers participated directly or indirectly in approximately 85 of these sinkings. German industry produced 242 new U-boats during 1944, barely matching losses. However, crew quality collapsed as experienced personnel were killed faster than adequate replacements could be trained. By late 1944, U-boats departed for patrol with commanders averaging 1 previous patrol and crews with minimal operational experience facing escort carrier groups, commanded by veterans with multiple successful kills. The industrial capacity that enabled escort carrier mass production represented broader American manufacturing dominance that German planners had catastrophically underestimated. While Germany strained to maintain U-boat production under Allied bombing and resource constraints, American industry produced escort carriers, destroyers, destroyer escorts, aircraft, and weapons in quantities that made numerical superiority inevitable. Henry Kaiser's shipyards demonstrated production efficiency that German naval constructors considered physically impossible. The Kaiser Vancouver yard, purpose-built for CVE construction beginning in 1942, employed assembly line techniques adapted from automobile manufacturing. Hull sections were fabricated in workshops as modular components, transported to slipways by overhead cranes, and welded into complete hulls in assembly line sequence. The flight deck, constructed in sections, was lowered onto the hull as a complete unit in single operation, lasting approximately 4 hours. Propulsion plants, built and tested as complete assemblies, were installed through hull openings, then sealed. The production statistics validated Kaiser's methods. Kaiser Vancouver launched its first CVE, USS Casablanca, on April 5, 1943, just 154 days after keel laying. By peak production in late 1943, the yard was completing 1 CVE every 6.7 days on average. Total workforce at Kaiser Vancouver reached 15,600 employees during maximum production in late 1943, representing approximately 32% female workers. These largely untrained civilians, many with no previous shipbuilding experience, produced aircraft carriers at rates professional naval constructors declared impossible. The workforce composition revealed American industrial mobilization's breadth. Rose Monroe, the worker who became famous as Rosie the Riveter, worked at Kaiser's Portland, Oregon yard before transferring to aircraft production. Her story, documented in wartime interviews preserved in Library of Congress archives, typified the industrial transformation. Monroe, a widowed mother of 2, received 6 weeks training in welding and riveting before assignment to CVE hull construction. She worked 10-hour shifts, 6 days weekly, earning $41.50 per week, substantially above typical female employment compensation. Monroe and thousands like her produced warships as efficiently as experienced shipwrights. validating American belief that standardized designs and systematic training could rapidly create skilled workforce. German U-boat construction, by comparison, remained craft-intensive despite attempts at rationalization. The Deschimag AG Weser yard in Bremen, one of Germany's primary U-boat builders, required approximately 280 days to build Type 7YC U-boats using traditional shipbuilding methods. Skilled welders, electricians, and fitters worked from detailed drawings, custom-fitting components that varied slightly between boats. Quality was excellent, but production rates remained limited by available skilled labor and increasing resource shortages. The industrial comparison extended to supporting industries. Each Casablanca-class CVE required approximately 4,200 aircraft radios, radar sets, and electronic equipment manufactured by companies including RCA, Western Electric, and General Electric. American electronics production in 1943 totaled approximately 26 million vacuum tubes monthly, supporting military and civilian requirements. Germany's entire electronics industry produced approximately 3.2 million tubes monthly, barely 12% of American output. The disparity meant American escort carriers deployed with radar, radio, and electronic systems superior to German equivalents, while being produced in far greater numbers. The aircraft production supporting CVE operations demonstrated similar industrial dominance. Grumman Aircraft produced 9,139 TBM Avengers from 1942 through 1945 at factory facilities in Bethpage, New York. General Motors' Eastern Aircraft Division produced an additional 7,546 Avengers under license, bringing total production to 17,385 aircraft. Peak production reached 400 aircraft monthly in mid-1944. For comparison, Germany's total production of all aircraft types in 1944 reached approximately 39,800 aircraft. American industry produced half that number in just one torpedo bomber type, while simultaneously producing fighters, heavy bombers, medium bombers, and transport aircraft in equally impressive numbers. The Avenger production cost, approximately $50,000 per aircraft in 1944 dollars, or roughly $900,000 in 2024 currency, represented efficient mass production of capable combat aircraft. Each Avenger carried either 4 500-pound depth charges, one 2,000-pound bomb, one Mark 24 Fido acoustic homing torpedo, or 8 5-inch rockets. The weapon load, combined with radar-enabling detection beyond visual range and endurance exceeding 5 hours, created purpose-built submarine, hunter superior to German equivalents. Germany attempted countermeasures against escort carrier, effectiveness but lacked industrial capacity to implement solutions at meaningful scale. The development of Schnorkel, a breathing apparatus allowing submarines to run diesel engines while submerged, partially addressed the vulnerability of surface operations. Schnorkel-equipped U-boats could charge batteries while submerged, eliminating the need to surface. However, Schnorkel implementation proceeded slowly due to manufacturing constraints. By May 1945, only approximately 160 U-boats had received Schnorkel installation from total construction of over 1,100 boats. The majority of operational U-boats still required surface operations for battery charging, remaining vulnerable to escort carrier aircraft. The Type Wüste Electroboot, Germany's advanced submarine design featuring improved underwater performance and reduced surface dependence, represented belated recognition that convoy tactics and escort carriers had made conventional U-boats obsolete. The Type Wüste could sustain 17 knots submerged using electric motors and massive battery capacity, theoretically enabling interception of convoys without surfacing. However, the Type Wüste entered production too late and in too limited numbers to affect the war. Of 118 Type Wüste boats commissioned, only 2 became operational before May 1945, neither conducting combat patrols. The boats that might have challenged escort carrier dominance arrived after the U-boat arm had been destroyed. American industrial capacity extended beyond platform production to comprehensive logistical support. The CVE logistics system maintained operational readiness through efficient supply chains that German forces could not match. Each escort carrier consumed approximately 1,200 tons of aviation gasoline monthly, 800 tons of ordnance, and 600 tons of spare parts and supplies during active operations. The Navy's supply system, coordinated through Atlantic Fleet Logistics Command, ensured CVE groups received continuous resupply from fleet oilers, ammunition ships, and supply vessels. Escort carriers could remain operational for months without returning to port. maintaining constant pressure on U-boat operating areas. German U-boat logistics deteriorated steadily through 1944 as Allied advances captured bases and bombing disrupted supply networks. Submarines increasingly returned from patrol with mechanical defects that could not be repaired due to parts shortages. The time required for overhaul and repair increased from average 28 days in 1942 to over 60 days in late 1944 as spare parts became scarce and bomber damage to repair facilities forced work delays. Operational availability declined from approximately 65% of commissioned boats in 1942 to barely 35% by late 1944. The cumulative industrial mathematics proved decisive. American industry produced 122 escort carriers, over 1,000 destroyer escorts and destroyers, and 17,000 anti-submarine aircraft from 1942 through 1945, while simultaneously conducting the largest amphibious warfare program in history and supporting Allied forces globally through Lend-Lease. Germany produced approximately 1,100 U-boats during the same period, while fighting multi-front war with deteriorating resource availability. The industrial contest was never equal. American capacity exceeded German capacity by factors ranging from 10 to 1 in some categories to 50 to 1 in others. Captain Daniel Gallery, reflecting on escort carrier operations in post-war memoir published in 1956, summarized the industrial dimension of the Battle of the Atlantic. Gallery wrote that U-boats were technically sophisticated weapons operated by brave crews, but technical excellence could not overcome numerical inferiority when that inferiority approached 10 to 1 in critical categories. American escort carriers were individually inferior to fleet carriers, but the United States could build 10 CVEs in the time required to build one fleet carrier. Each CVE could kill submarines as effectively as fleet carriers while costing 1/10 as much. The mathematics were simple. Adequate multiplied by overwhelming equals superiority. Germany built excellent U-boats. America built adequate escort carriers in overwhelming numbers. Adequate overwhelming defeated excellent limited. The final year of the U-boat war, from June 1944 through May 1945, witnessed not merely defeat but the systematic extinction of submarine operational capability. The combination of escort carrier effectiveness, improving technology, and collapsing German industrial capacity reduced U-boat operations from strategic threat to futile sacrifice. The operational statistics from mid-1944 documented the collapse. From June through December 1944, U-boats sank only 423,000 tons of Allied shipping, averaging approximately 60,000 tons monthly. For comparison, in November 1942, U-boats had sunk 729,000 tons in a single month. The decline exceeded 90% from peak effectiveness, while Allied shipping construction continued at rates exceeding 3 million tons monthly. Germany was losing the tonnage war by mathematical margins so overwhelming that no tactical adjustment could alter outcomes. The human cost of continued operations became apparent in crew morale assessments compiled by German Naval Medical Services. A report from the Naval Medical Office dated September 1944, captured after the war and translated by Allied intelligence, documented psychological breakdown among submarine crews. The report stated that approximately 65% of U-boat crew members displayed symptoms of severe anxiety or depression before departing on patrol. Many experienced what medical staff termed pre-patrol collapse, psychological breakdown so severe that crew members became operationally incapable before even leaving port. The report noted that traditional military discipline could not address conditions where crew members understood with statistical certainty that patrol meant death. Kapitänleutnant Peter Kremer, one of few commanders to survive multiple patrols through 1944, described the psychological conditions in his post-war memoir published in 1984. Kremer wrote that by late 1944, U-boat bases resembled concentration camps more than military installations. Crews awaiting patrol assignments drank heavily, attempting to escape awareness of statistical probabilities. Those returning from patrol described conditions where escort carrier aircraft made operations impossible and where survival depended entirely on luck rather than skill. Kremer stated that he watched young crews, many with members barely 18 years old, depart knowing they would not return. The waste was obscene. Germany was feeding children to machinery that consumed them for no strategic purpose. The escort carrier operations continued methodically destroying the remnants of U-boat capability. USS Mission Bay, operating under Captain Harold Stevenson, sank U-539 on July 2, 1944, in the Atlantic west of Cape Verde. The kill demonstrated how improved technology eliminated any possibility of submarine concealment. Mission Bay aircraft detected U-539 through radar contact at 32 miles, while the submarine operated submerged at schnorkel depth. Previous radar could not detect schnorkel masts, but improved centimetric radar could identify the small radar return from the breathing tube. Aircraft attacked the radar contact with Fido acoustic homing torpedoes. U-539 sank with all hands. The kill proved that even schnorkel-equipped submarines remained vulnerable to escort carrier prosecution. USS Solomons achieved one of the final significant CVE kills on November 4, 1944, sinking U-508 southwest of Madeira. The engagement occurred during conditions Germany had designed U-boat tactics to exploit: night, rough seas, poor visibility. Solomons aircraft, equipped with advanced radar and infrared detection equipment, located U-508 surfaced at 0240 hours. Depth charges destroyed the submarine before it could dive. The kill demonstrated that technology had eliminated every operational window German tactics depended upon: day or night, surface or submerged, calm seas or rough weather. Escort carrier groups could detect and destroy U-boats with near certainty. The interrogation of survivors from U-1229, sunk by destroyer escorts from USS Kroaten's group on August 20, 1944, revealed the extent of German tactical bankruptcy. Oberleutnant zur See Erich Lange, U-1229's commander, stated during interrogation that German Naval Command continued issuing patrol orders and tactical directives, but the orders bore no relationship to actual conditions. Directives assumed U-boats could surface, maneuver, and attack. Reality was that escort carrier aircraft forced boats to remain submerged continuously, preventing battery charging and making transit at effective speed impossible. Lange stated that U-1229 spent 87% of its patrols submerged, compared to 40% in 1942 patrols. The boat achieved no successes during 61 days at sea before being sunk. Admiral Dönitz faced the statistical evidence of failure throughout late 1944, but continued operations under Hitler's direct orders. Dönitz's war diary entries from October and November 1944, captured by Allied forces and declassified in 1968, revealed a commander executing orders he knew were militarily senseless. On October 18, 1944, Dönitz wrote that U-boat losses continued exceeding replacement capacity, that crews were inadequately trained, that Allied anti-submarine effectiveness made successful attacks nearly impossible, and that strategic impact of U-boat operations had become negligible. However, Hitler insisted that U-boat presence alone justified operations by forcing Allies to maintain anti-submarine forces. Dönitz complied, sending submarines and crews to certain death for psychological rather than military effect. The final operational statistics documented extinction. From January through April 1945, U-boats sank only 91,000 tons of Allied shipping total, averaging approximately 23,000 tons monthly. Allied forces sank 153 U-boats during the same period. Germany was losing 1.7 boats for every ship sunk, inverting the exchange ratio necessary for successful commerce warfare. By any military metric, U-boat operations had become completely ineffective while consuming scarce resources and irreplaceable personnel. USS Kroaten achieved the final confirmed U-boat kill by escort carrier on April 23, 1945, sinking U-546 in the Atlantic north of the Azores. The engagement followed pattern established by hundreds of previous kills: radar detection, aircraft attack, destroyer escort prosecution, submarine destruction. U-546 managed to damage destroyer escort Frederick C. Davis with torpedo before being sunk, but the tactical success was meaningless. One escort lost in exchange for one U-boat represented outcome Germany could not sustain. By April 1945, the United States was building destroyer escorts faster than U-boats could sink them, while escort carriers eliminated U-boats faster than Germany could build replacements. The surrender of the German armed forces on May 8, 1945, found approximately 375 U-boats still in commission. Of these, 218 were scuttled by their crews to prevent capture. The remaining 157 surrendered to Allied forces. Many boats surfaced flying black flags of surrender. Crews aware the war was lost and further resistance pointless, Allied forces inspected the surrendered submarines and found boats in various states of disrepair. many with mechanical defects that could not be repaired due to parts shortages, others with systems degraded by inadequate maintenance. The final accounting of the U-boat war revealed scope of German defeat. From September 1939 through May 1945, Germany commissioned approximately 1,162 U-boats of all types. Of these, 784 were lost to enemy action, representing 67% of all boats commissioned. Allied forces killed approximately 28,000 German submariners of approximately 40,000 who served, representing 70% killed in action, the highest loss rate of any German military service. The U-boat arm, which had terrorized Allied shipping from 1940 through 1942, achieved negligible strategic impact after mid-1943, when escort carriers became operational in numbers. Escort carriers participated directly in sinking 53 U-boats and assisted in the destruction of dozens more through providing air coverage, forcing submarines to remain submerged, and denying operational freedom necessary for successful attacks. The CVE contribution extended beyond direct kills to systematic denial of surface operations that made wolfpack tactics impossible. By forcing U-boats to operate submerged, escort carriers reduced submarine effectiveness to levels incompatible with successful commerce warfare. The post-war U.S. Navy assessment of escort carrier contributions, compiled by Commander-in-Chief Atlantic Fleet and published in 1946, concluded that CVE operations transformed the Battle of the Atlantic from defensive convoy protection to offensive submarine elimination. The report stated that escort carriers proved that aircraft carriers could be mass-produced using industrial methods, and that specialized carriers optimized for specific missions could achieve effectiveness equal to or exceeding more expensive fleet carriers. The Jeep carriers that German commanders mocked in 1942 had destroyed the U-boat arm by 1944, validating American industrial philosophy that adequate systems produced in overwhelming numbers defeat superior systems produced in limited quantities. The destruction of the U-boat arm through escort carrier operations demonstrated principles of industrial warfare that extended far beyond anti-submarine tactics. The Battle of the Atlantic proved that modern warfare is decided in factories as much as battlefields, and that industrial capacity to sustain operations outweighs tactical excellence when that excellence cannot be maintained across sufficient scale. The final statistics of the Battle of the Atlantic revealed the comprehensive nature of Allied victory. From September 1939 through May 1945, U-boats sank approximately 2,780 Allied merchant ships, totaling 14.4 million tons. This represented devastating losses that would have crippled any nation lacking American industrial replacement capacity. However, Allied shipyards, primarily American and Canadian, produced approximately 42 million tons of new merchant shipping during the same period, nearly 3 times the tonnage sunk. Germany destroyed shipping at impressive rates but could not sink. Vessels faster than industrial democracies could build replacements. The escort carrier production and operational statistics exemplified industrial warfare principles. American shipyards produced 122 escort carriers from 1942 through 1945 at average cost of approximately $6 million per ship. Total program cost reached roughly $730 million, equivalent to approximately $13 billion in 2024 currency. This investment produced anti-submarine capability that destroyed 67% of all U-boats commissioned, killed 70% of U-boat personnel, and reduced submarine effectiveness by over 90% from peak performance. The return on investment was decisive strategic victory achieved through industrial mass production. Germany's U-boat program, by comparison, consumed approximately 3.8 billion Reichsmarks from 1939 through 1945, equivalent to roughly $21 billion in 2024 dollars. The program produced 1,162 submarines, lost 784 to enemy action, and achieved strategic impact that declined to negligibility by 1944. Germany spent 60% more than American escort carrier program while achieving negative strategic returns. The investment in U-boats diverted resources from other programs without delivering sustainable results. Admiral Karl Dönitz's post-war assessment, documented in his memoir published in 1958 and in testimony at Nuremberg trials, acknowledged that escort carriers fundamentally altered the tactical environment in ways German command had not anticipated. Dönitz wrote that German naval planning assumed aircraft carriers would remain concentrated with fleet operations, leaving convoy protection to destroyers and corvettes. The American decision to mass-produce specialized escort carriers optimized for anti-submarine warfare represented industrial philosophy. Germany could not match even if German commanders had recognized the threat earlier. Dönitz stated that once escort carriers became operational in numbers exceeding 20 vessels by mid-1943, U-boat surface operations became impossible and submarine effectiveness collapsed accordingly. The technological legacy of escort carrier operations extended into post-war naval aviation. The CVE demonstrated that specialized carriers could perform specific missions as effectively as fleet carriers, while costing fraction of fleet carrier expenses. This principle influenced post-war carrier development, including anti-submarine warfare carriers, amphibious assault carriers, and other specialized designs. The British Invincible-class carriers, American America-class amphibious assault ships, and other modern specialized carriers trace conceptual lineage to World War II escort. Carriers that proved specialized optimization outperforms generalized capability. For specific missions, the industrial methodology, pioneered in CVE construction, influenced post-war shipbuilding globally. Henry Kaiser's modular construction techniques, assembly line processes, and civilian workforce training programs became standard in commercial shipbuilding. The Liberty Ship Program, which produced 2,710 merchant ships using similar methods, demonstrated that Kaiser's approach applied across ship types. Post-war commercial shipyards adopted modular construction, reducing build times and costs while maintaining quality. The methods that produced one escort carrier every 6.7 days during peak wartime production enabled post-war commercial shipping expansion that supported global trade growth. The human dimension of escort carrier operations demonstrated that training programs could rapidly create effective military forces from civilian populations. The CVE crews, largely composed of personnel with minimal naval experience, operated complex warships and conducted sophisticated anti-submarine warfare with effectiveness equal to pre-war professional naval forces. The training systems developed to create CVE crews influenced post-war military personnel development across all services. The principle that systematic training and clear procedures enable rapid force expansion became foundation of modern military personnel systems. Captain Daniel Gallery, whose USS Guadalcanal captured U-505 intact, reflected on escort carrier operations in his 1956 memoir. Gallery wrote that the Jeep carriers validated American belief that industrial capacity combined with adequate technology defeats technical sophistication combined with limited production. German U-boats were excellent submarines operated by brave crews using sophisticated tactics. American escort carriers were adequate warships operated by hastily trained crews using systematic procedures. Adequate, systematic, overwhelmed, excellent, limited. The lesson applied beyond naval warfare to industrial competition generally. Gallery concluded that nations capable of mass-producing adequate solutions defeat nations producing excellent solutions in limited quantities when adequacy meets minimum operational requirements and mass production provides numerical superiority. The strategic impact of escort carrier operations extended beyond direct U-boat kills to enabling Allied offensive operations. The security of Atlantic convoy routes assured American reinforcement of European theaters and sustained British war-making capacity. Without escort carriers controlling U-boat threats, the build-up for D-Day invasion would have been delayed or potentially impossible. The 156,000 troops landed on D-Day, 2,000 troops in France by September 1944, and supplies sustaining Allied offensive operations all depended on convoy security that escort carriers provided. The Jeep carriers enabled strategic victory by protecting logistics networks that made offensive operations possible. The final operational statistics from escort carrier anti-submarine groups documented comprehensive effectiveness. From March 1943 through May 1945, CVE groups sank 53 U-boats directly through aircraft or coordinated aircraft destroyer escort attacks. Additionally, CVE air coverage forced submarines to remain submerged in areas where other anti-submarine forces prosecuted contacts, contributing to sinking of approximately 120 additional U-boats. The operational availability of escort carriers averaged 78% from 1943 through 1945, meaning that of 32 Atlantic Fleet CVEs operational at peak strength, approximately 25 were at sea conducting operations at any time. This persistent pressure denied U-boats the operational freedom necessary for effective commerce warfare. The cost-effectiveness analysis validated the Escort carrier program. Each CVE cost approximately $6 million and sank or contributed to sinking an average 1.6 U-boats over operational lifetime. Each U-boat sunk represented 6 million Reichsmarks investment lost, approximately $10.5 million in 1944 exchange rates. The United States invested $6 million in platforms that destroyed $10.5 million of German assets, while protecting shipping worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The return on investment exceeded any other anti-submarine warfare system employed during the war. Vice Admiral Royal Ingersoll, Commander-in-Chief Atlantic Fleet from 1942 through 1944, summarized Escort carrier contributions in post-war report to Chief of Naval Operations. Ingersoll wrote that CVE operations demonstrated that modern naval warfare required industrial capacity to sustain prolonged operations against determined opponents. Technical excellence in individual platforms mattered less than industrial capacity to produce adequate platforms in numbers, ensuring numerical superiority. German U-boats possessed technical advantages over American submarines and surface anti-submarine vessels in several categories. However, American industry produced escort carriers, destroyer escorts, aircraft, and weapons in quantities that overwhelmed German tactical advantages through persistent numerical superiority. Ingersoll concluded that the Battle of the Atlantic was won in American shipyards and aircraft factories as much as on the ocean. The Jeep carriers proved that industrial wars are won by industrial powers, capable of sustaining production sufficient to replace losses while maintaining offensive pressure. The legacy of escort carrier operations resonates in modern understanding of industrial warfare. The principle that adequate systems mass-produced overwhelm excellent systems produced in limited quantities applies to military competition in the 21st century as clearly as it applied to World War II. Nations capable of sustaining industrial production during prolonged conflict possess fundamental advantages over nations dependent on limited production of sophisticated systems. The escort carrier, mocked by German U-boat commanders in 1942 as improvised compromise, proved decisively effective by 1944, validating American industrial philosophy and demonstrating that wars are won by factories that never stop producing adequate solutions in overwhelming numbers. German U-boat captains mocked American escort carriers as jeep carriers, Kaiser Coffins, and makeshift vessels unworthy of consideration as serious threats. By 1945, the survivors acknowledged that these supposedly inferior ships had systematically destroyed the U-boat arm, killed 28,000 submariners, and reduced submarine warfare from strategic threat to expensive irrelevance. The mockery stopped when German submarines could no longer surface without facing carrier aircraft. The arrogance disappeared when U-boat commanders recognized that American industry could build submarine hunters faster than Germany could build submarines. The lesson was clear. Industrial capacity defeats tactical excellence. Mass production overwhelms limited sophistication. Adequate multiplied by overwhelming defeats excellent multiplied by inadequate. The jeep carriers hunted the U-boats to extinction, proving that American industrial warfare wins through relentless mathematics of production.